But we got a few things to go over, and we'll get started. So
Let's do the round table first.
I don't care if you guys want to do round table.
I'm just kidding. But you know, I do have a suggestion.
Sure.
Once I'm gone and there's not even a murmur left, I think that you should think about this. Have a period for public comment at work sessions. And do it, say maybe like the commissioners do it, give them 3 minutes. At some point, it's just good because you'll have less at the regular meetings. It's already, one of our good friends doesn't speak nearly as much since we moved it forward. Because he doesn't get to hear all the stuff.
Right.
You gotta anticipate.
I thought you were gonna say you were gonna donate a little sign that said CADA, that you wanted somebody to wave around.
I hope there's gonna be one person that'll at least, stick the needle in them every now and then. Or the council. I doubt that'll happen.
All right, orphan agency funding. We need direction on this.
Mr. Mayor, if it pleases the council, we would be happy to take direction this evening on this matter. Good evening, everybody. Good to be with you. I don't know if you recall or not, but earlier in the year, we talked about eliminating relationships with pass-through agencies as a part of our funding portfolio, as a part of your funding portfolio. And as a result of that policy approach, there are a number of agencies that became orphanized, if you will, with regard to access to city funds. And so, in addition to that, the funding that was historically made available through these agencies, through the pass-through kinds of agencies, was also made available with regard to that policy decision. And so what we proposed to you over the weekend, of course, was a manner by which those agencies could be funded with regard to that funding that was made available. And that was by virtue of an application process that we put together and they responded to, and the results of which you saw on your chart that we handed out. We are proposing that those agencies be acknowledged with regard to the funds that they are in need of, and historically that we have, you, the council, has provided funding for, with the addition of CATSI as a part of that, as well as interfaith, so that indeed you would effectively spend the $242,000 that's made available by the elimination of that pass-through program, and those agencies would be taken care of then in regards to what we demonstrated this to you in your packet.
Questions, Dallas?
Who dreams up the word orphaned?
Mr. Mayor,
Was it you?
Council, that was my construct.
Did you dream up the one on the legacy debt too?
Legacy funding, yes.
I've sent a letter to President Trump that says he should hire you for the big money. But, so this is giving money where some things fell through the cracks, is that it, the idea?
This restores funding.
And we can afford it?
And it is funding that's available, and would be basically a one-time sort of program that we are recommending you
But
support.
the thing I like, there's one of them that says we're gonna give money so people can ride the bus free. I saw that, didn't I, in there?
That's in there, yep.
So I vote yes.
Bob and then Jesse.
Yeah, that's the way I took this. This is a one-shot deal.
One shot.
And we're in fact replacing money that was taken away from CAP for FY18. Okay. And these are the amounts here, excuse me.
Oh, no, you're-
But it's
On the staff recommendation column that we're proposing, basically.
Jesse and then Charlie.
Just want to say that I support the staff recommendations outlined in the packet.
Can you again explain where the current request amounts came from, Carter?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I can. They are effectively requesting funding as a part of that program. And so that would have been what came through on the application process that we established for this.
Apart from the process we just went through.
Apart from, and that's an important distinction, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councilman, you're correct, because the process that we just went through was 1% 16 only. The funding that we're talking about now is funding that's available through 1 cent 15 that would have been distributed through pass-through agencies to these agencies that you see on your list.
So, do we have any idea how much of the community action amount, the $50,000, would have been used to administer the distribution process? If that question makes sense, as opposed to direct services, because some portion of it was administrative because they were that distribution agency.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's an important question as well. Because if you recall, early into our relationship together, CAP came forward with a proposal that council should alter the contract that you have with them, or had with them, however you want to look at it, that would allow them to use 1 cent funding for administrative, i.e. operational purposes. At that time, council said they were not interested in altering the contract to that degree and awarded the $30,000 to be made available for programming. And so that's why you see that number carrying through this conversation, because we're suggesting it be made available this year only for their programming.
Okay, thank you. I support this as well.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, that's good.
Excellent, thank you. We will move forward then.
And is this money that is available and will be distributed to them relatively right now? Or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, this funding is available now, and it would be distributed pursuant to the formal motion that we would take when?
The next council.
The next council meeting. So, and if I remember correctly, and I'm sorry, I have to kind of refresh my memory a little bit, we would entertain contracts for their relationships as well, right? Okay. So that would be the mechanism by which we'd make that happen.
So now can we say they've been lovingly adopted by the city?
They have been adopted pursuant to your thumbs up just now, in my
Great move
opinion.
on your part, Mr. Manager.
Thank you.
Next up, city app demo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. There has been a number of conversations along these lines with regard to citizen engagement in the form of apps that would be made available to our community and citizenry. There's variations, of course, for what that could look like, and the nexus that we're struggling with right now is with regard to providing services in that regard or in that manner ahead of the software implementation that we have on our table as we speak, that would give us a fuller approach to that gap, if you will, in our service provision. What we're suggesting is that the full approach would be had probably more to your satisfaction when that implementation is in place and we can roll out a more comprehensive package. We have a couple ideas that we'd like to go over with you tonight that we can kind of bridge that gap until then. And we have one of which will cost a little bit of money. And so we want to go over that with you tonight if we could, and get your direction accordingly.
Sounds good.
That's all right. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Director Belser or Michael, and go from there.
So I have a question, because I wondered if this wasn't a hack thing. So I was gonna cause I think it got sent to all of you. Is that a hacking?
It was a phishing attempt, yes, sir.
You passed the test.
You passed the test. It was a test phishing attempt actually
Oh,
sent
test?
out by
Well,
IT
I see
staff
that kind of stuff and I
to-
go, I
as
don't
a
even like
training
opening
tool.
it. Okay,
So
thank
if
you.
you didn't click on it, then
Why are we being
And you
tested?
asked the question, so that's the right thing.
the
That's
whole
what you need to do.
organization was tested. Just
Which-
We get it in this
Because
county
you're
side
not
as well.
techie savvy.
Mhm.
You're old.
I'm techie savvy, I knew not to do it. What are you saying?
I clicked it.
I can run a smartphone and a dumb phone.
What percentage clicked it, Michael?
we don't know just yet.
But you'll know soon.
Yeah.
Do you know who did it personally? Do you know who the individuals might be? Let's just say hypothetically, I did it. Would you be able to?
It'll be in big
Can
red
you
letters.
define that?
It'll be big red letters that said Ray failed.
There'll be a press release tomorrow.
Did I not do it?
Yes. Like an idiot.
I was in his office shortly, at the other office.
But that's
Over
the
some
exact
reason.
reason that we did do the test is
But
for
I
it to
was
be a
changing
training
passwords
aid
on
that kind of
I've got two city
remind
mail
people to
accounts.
not
and I
do
was
it
changing
in the
passwords.
future.
and I
We'd
thought
rather
it was
you
a
click
hassle.
on the one that we're testing with if you're gonna screw up, than click on a real one.
Gotcha.
That's best.
No.
Me suspicious.
Yep.
I usually Google.
Now I'm
to
changing
see
my
if
whole
it's a
personality
scam,
because of
it'll
it.
usually tell you.
I trust no one now.
And a lot of times the links and the address, the email addresses are incorrect as well. All right, so switching back to the app. As the city manager said, we're trying to be responsive to council's goal to increase opportunities for public engagement. We've beefed up the website. We are using Facebook diligently. We are using YouTube for basically all of our videos of our council meetings, council work sessions, planning and zoning meetings. This is basically an additional component should we want to use it. And as an app, that's a device that you would download either on your phone or on an iPad or something like that, and let you just click that link or that button to get straight to city resources, as opposed to going to the City of Casper's website and pulling up those resources. The difference between basically the two app options that we're talking about is one, this first one that we can implement now would be a much more scaled down version that would look somewhere similar to this. This Sierra Madre one is created by the same company that's hosting our website. They host Sierra Madre's website, and they created Sierra Madre's app. And as you can see, they've got those different buttons, and these buttons basically link back, provide links to that city's website to show them what services they're offering. So I think I just clicked agendas. You can click the calendar. It's basically a shortcut for you to go to those city services, but they're still in essence the city website that are being provided. Where we'll have more options in the next 18 months is we'll actually be able to have more interaction with the citizenry by allowing them to make requests. So on this Corpus Christi app, you can see that they've got this link up here in the top left that says a new request. And when you click that, you can get all these. And then you can click dangerous dog. No, that wasn't a good one. Building inspection complaint. And then they'll take that complaint from you right there. And what's kind of cool with an app that's tied into our organizational work order system is they would fill out the work order request, then it would go into our work order system. When we update it, they could actually get that updated communication back. Yes, this building complaint has been addressed, or yes, this pothole has been fixed, and you're actually opening the door for that two-way communication. That's basically the difference. This app here would be more full-featured to provide that two-way communication as opposed to the first app. So what we're asking is, does council interested enough in an app that we go with the scaled-down version now and provide some sort of service, or do we want, when we offer the service, to offer a more feature-rich service that that will be a benefit to the citizens.
Can you do both? Start with this little one, and then when the big one comes available, go to it?
Absolutely, and that's we basically say that this would the smaller one would be an in the interim solution. Yes.
Sorry, but there was a 3-year commitment to that, right? Isn't there a 3-year commitment?
There would be a 3-year commitment to this, but we would actually be able to create a link to our CRM system, to the Tyler work order system on this app in 2020 when it becomes available.
And the cost was what?
To do this now, it would be $3,500 per year,
So we have to do it for 3 years,
a minimum of 3 years. Yes, sir.
10 grand.
Any other thoughts, questions for Michael? Jessica?
I just wanted to say, I guess my concern would be rolling out the scaled down version is you have people using it but not to its full potential, so they might kind of discard it, and then once it's made available in its full functionality, it might just be something that's not used. So I guess maybe another campaigning effort to raise awareness of the potential would have to be brought up. But I do like it. It's great.
Corey, you got a clear? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Could we sunset this? I mean, after 3 years, did anybody use it? Because we went through this kind of with Channel 162 or whatever for a while. We were paying them something on the order of 10 grand a year to do original programming. Turns out nobody watched it. So,
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think that's a good question. The answer is yes, certainly. With the Tyler implementation, we're going to want to be pretty deliberate about what it is that we put out there and so forth, with regard to the services and whatnot that we would extend to our community, and I think that needs to be understood. That has to be a dynamic product, so that we do base our deliverable upon the interest of the community, so that indeed if we do have something out there it's not being used, we can pull it and get something out there that's better or would go in a different direction. So that would certainly be my hope, that would be what we could do.
Dallas?
Have you done research to find out, for instance, with this city here, the Sierra Madre, what the usage is in that town?
Not Sierra Madre.
So I guess I would be for it, but I would like to know what these other towns, because that's a good point Bob made. Nobody's using it. I'd like to know that.
Troy?
So I'll display my ignorance here. Is this going to take the place of our current website? So it would be just 2 completely different systems in parallel?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the idea actually, particularly for the interim, is to incorporate portions of our website in a more easy to use, one touch, if you will, perspective that apps typically provide. And so at this point, really, you're integrating the 2 mediums in order to try to extend service on a more convenient basis.
So if someone calls up the City of Casper's website, it will be the same as it is now.
Right.
Or used on
And they would have a
phones.
way to get access to this from there.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the idea is that when a person wants to, say, file a complaint with the organization, they hit a button and it takes them directly to a screen similar to what Michael just showed you, instead of having to navigate through the layers of the website to get to that at one point.
It's called technology. It's advanced technology.
That's right.
Downloading from the App Store
Yep.
to your cell phone, so there's an app right on your phone.
so it's free for the App Store?
Mm-hmm. Yep, be free, Michael. Any other questions? Everybody, how do they feel?
We'll find out, but you'll track the usage, right?
Yes.
Give us a report, yeah, okay.
I'm good with testing it out, make a test of
See what I do.
I don't know how many people are gonna download it after this.
Yeah, that would be the first question.
Well,
Very exciting. Exactly. That's true.
How much are we spending annually to purchase
Angry Birds.
Right, Angry Birds and City app.
legislative required notices?
Tax payment you were talking about?
We need to get it.
No,
That's Yeah, put some games on it.
Will
That's
that
the games on
go
it.
to
a lot more
trash?
than this.
It's a lot more than that.
Got that right.
Right? Under budget.
Okay. Pogadon and golf debrief. Mr. Cortez, I'll let you say anything.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are at an interesting reflection point with regard to the way in which we are delivering services both at Hogadon and the golf course. As you know, we have entered into new relationships at Hogadon and kind of taking a new or different approach. And we've also engaged with a new contractor up at the golf course for the concession side of things, even though the idea at the golf course of delivering concessions in that regard isn't necessarily new. Council has had some questions, and we are providing data this evening that hopefully will help you understand and get a feel for how this is working out on both sides of that coin. And with regard to that, I'd be happy to defer the conversation to Mr. Cortez, who has put together some analysis in that regard.
Mr. Mayor, members, council, we kind of have a whole bunch of little data points within the packet for you to look at. We did really want to focus on the restaurant side of things, but I'm prepared to take your questions on any part of the operations, or we can go over it in its entirety and provide the best answers that I can. Basically, if I'm going to start with the golf course, if you remember right, kind of in the early spring when we entered into that contract, there were some concerns from a couple people in the public whether or not the person was adequate for the job or that we'd see the revenue that we needed to see. And so at that point, we promised you that at the end of the season, we'd kind of come back to you and say, hey, this is kind of how it went over the summer. So that's where we're at. And what you'll see outlined in the memo is basically over the same time period. The golf course is a little bit different in the aspect that the splits a fiscal year with the season, if you will, since it's in July, and that's where we're just kind of getting geared up and stuff. But what I did is I took the same time period that we had with the previous vendor that we had and took that data, which was about $1,200 is what the city saw as part of our part of the contract, and then compared it the same time period of our current contractor to what they got, and you'll see it's about $2,500. So we're not talking about a lot of money here, but you will see that it doubled what the city saw. But more importantly, last year our vendor did not complete the season. They kind of tapped out in the middle of the season, said, hey, we're not really making any money, we're done. The problem that we had there then was the golfers up the golf course wanted our amenity to get food and beverage and didn't have access to it. So you even see recorded in that figure that they were paying us $250 for their rent. So we were seeing a little bit of income, but we didn't have the amenity. And so that really hurt our golfing season and what we could provide to those golfers last year. And on the flip side, what we have this year is we still have a business, a restaurant that is going strong up there, still taking in revenue and providing the service to our golf community. So for that, I would say that it's it's a successful operation. As I outlined in the memo too, we kind of have an escalator on that contract, meaning we got 3% of gross this year. Next year we'll see 4%, and then the final year we'll see 5% of gross. So the hope is that it'll continue to grow. So with that, I'd take any questions if you have anything that you want to discuss on the golf course in general.
So that guy proved himself,
My
is
estimation,
what
yes,
I
sir.
would say. And that we don't want Jesse allowing 5-hour rounds though. We gotta keep it to 4, or we'll have all the golfers really mad.
How about we just allow golf carts on the course during the hours that it says it's open? That'd be a big step forward.
Jesse, go talk to people who play golf, and they'll give you all the answers you want. I don't need to do it.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I haven't been out there for a while, or at least a couple of years. Is there a cart with concessions and things on it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, you're absolutely correct. But going back to last year, we didn't have that feature, but this year we do, and it is part of the contract that we as the city can say, hey, we're getting complaints, for instance, that there's a cart that's not being servicing folks in this certain time period, and then we can go to that vendor and the contract and say, hey, you know, there's people that are voicing this concern, so therefore you need to have the cart in this hours.
Right.
Are we selling beer out there on the golf course? We are?
You gonna go golf now?
No wonder he's doing well. Is that legal, Mr. Manager?
Club
Mr. Mayor,
license.
Councilman, it's within his permit, his license
license.
to operate.
So they can move all over those 18 holes, so all over
27?
27.
27 holes, well, how many acres is that?
How many acres is that?
Couldn't tell you.
So they can drive and drink and walk with the beer, and we can't go for Jesse's little deal letting people walk between venues
I
downtown.
like that. I like that little lead up.
It's all on one property.
all-
No,
on
we're
one property.
reconfiguring one of the old snowcats to be a bar, so.
Good deal. We can get that stuff delivered up on the mountain when the skiers are coming down, hand them a beer.
Any other questions for Tim?
Anyways, Mr. Mayor, Council, I would like to just tell you that that operation is in its entirety is doing well.
Yeah.
You know, over this year, over last fiscal year, we saw growth of about $18,000 in revenue. It's the only facility that I oversee that we turn a profit. So they're really doing a good job. for the
Maybe
city.
we ought to let that guy run Hogan on. They lost 400,000 up there.
It's all about the weather though, isn't it, Tim?
But we do track days of play. You're absolutely correct, Councilman. It's important.
Playing the
It's
rain
important for both of what we're going to talk about this evening.
The only facility making money, we don't put any money into the clubhouse. It's a darn shame.
Thanks, Tim.
With relation to Hogadon then, kind of a different contract, obviously different facility. Spectra manages that. Just to refresh your memory, it's $35,000 we pay them annually. We retain 90% of the profit. They get 10% of the profit, of which last year we didn't have any profit. So I outlined in the menu, we lost just over $39,000 on that food and beverage side of the house. But also I'd like to point out that Spectra, as part of their RFP process, had infused $50,000 into that account, that operating account, for startup costs and wares and things that they thought that they would need to bring it all online. But as it stands now, that $50,000 is pretty much diminished to nothing. So I've been working hard with Spectra to try to figure out why we lost that chunk of money and then how to turn it around for this coming season. Probably the biggest piece that it comes down to is labor. We'd have 5 people in that operation day to day on a Wednesday afternoon even, and there'd be like 5 people on the ski hill, So the labor was really chewing us up. You'll see that now that they've kind of got a history to go off of, you'll see that scaled back during the weekdays when there's not as many people on the slopes, and then ramp up on the weekends or on time periods when the kids come up in school buses or something like that that have that help available. The other nice feature that we'll have this fiscal year is that we'll be able to spread that $35,000 over 12 months. If you recall, we got that contract beginning in November, so we basically paid them $35,000 for 7 months. So we were paying $5,000 a month for just the management costs, whereas now we'll be able to spread that over the entire year, which will help as well. Once again, though, to Councilman Powell's comment about the weather, very much weather dependent up in Hogadon. So we didn't have much snow last year, and it's all about timing. We really want to see that powder in the winter time, or on the weekends when we have a lot of people up there. So that's kind of what we're hoping for. But we have about a 30-point plan to increase revenue, drive down expenses for just the food and beverage operation alone this coming season.
Chuck?
I want to step back on Hogadon for just a minute. Mike knows a lot more about this history than I do, but it was built by a private group and put up for sale, as I was told, put up for sale. No one bought it, so the city ended up taking it over, is what I understand. And I'm guessing that it wasn't a marketable property because of the condition of the facilities. Now the facilities are ideal. Is this time for us to consider the possibility of private operation?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, it's a good point. I think that we probably have to show a track record of profit for anyone probably to step in and look at. We get these rumors about once or twice a year. Someone just recently came and said, "Hey, I heard a rumor that Hogadon's for sale," and I think what Councilman Laird said, well, it loses. We had to subsidize it $400,000 last fiscal year. The year before that, it was $393. So I am happy that we only subsidized an additional $7,000 for the last fiscal year, but I think that it'd be tough for a private group to obtain the financing without a better track record as far as getting some good solid income. But
My thought isn't so much for selling it, but doing what we're doing with the event center. And
$1 million a year, Charlie.
And there are some reasons to think about it. I mean, we had as you point out, the snow is unpredictable, and we had 1 week that I recall where we had, I believe we had a holiday, and so we were open on the holiday. And then we got dumped on a Wednesday, and Hogadon was closed because of the rules that we have to follow with city employees. Whereas a private operation would have said, hey, we got snow, you guys are coming into work. And we were closed on one of the finest days for skiing of the year. And I mean, there's just some restrictions we deal with as a city-run operation that a private operation doesn't have to deal with. So I don't know. I guess there's only one way to find out. And I don't know how Snowy Range, it runs in the black, how other small areas run in the black, but it seems like our facilities are now pretty good quality. So I don't know. I just want to throw it out there. I don't know if anybody else is interested, but it's always been in the back of my mind that once we got this thing fixed, maybe we could get out of the business of running it. I think we're one of 2 city-operated ski areas in the country. I don't know. You have an opinion about this, Mike?
There are a lot more Parks and Rec operated ski areas than that.
Really?
In the
Okay.
country.
I
Yeah,
don't know where I
there
got
are.
that from, but
Yeah, the biggest one is Denver Parks and Recs with Winter Park. But as to the how to run a small ski area in the black, and I've had this conversation. If you, in my humble opinion, if you designed a way to take a small ski area and not make money, that is exactly what the city did at Hogadon. You do not make money turning the chairs and selling lift tickets. What you do, it's just like at the movie theater.
Right.
You put the movie on the screen to get people in there to sell them overpriced popcorn and pop and that kind of stuff. At Hogadon, the city farmed out the rental shop, which is usually a money maker for an area. They farmed out the ski school, which is usually a money maker. They farmed out the food and beverage, that's how you make money. And if you go to any other small ski area that's operating in the black, they're making money on those areas. And the city of Casper, years ago, in a fit of wisdom, I guess, farmed out all of the money-making opportunities up there. And so we find ourselves where we are. And you always have to operate from where you are. One of the questions, and so Charlie, when you ask for anyone asks for my experience and observation on, well, how could we be making money? Those are the areas.
And lodging, of course, is the other thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you can factor in lodging and that stuff, but those are big areas. But the questions that I have, Tim, like last year, there'd be times when there'd be people that would want to come in and enjoy the lodge after skiing. Inspectors are, we're closed. Right after closing, no, I'm sorry, we're closing. We have to get downtown for this or that or something. You're talking to the golf course people about hours and staying open. Are you talking to Spectrum about that up there? because, you know, there'd be people sitting there ready to hand them money. Well, I'm sorry, we're closed. And to me, that was very frustrating. And you know, and the thing is that it's not a secret with you turn people away, they're not going to come back. You know, the parents that maybe come up there to pick their kids up, well, the last time I went in there to have a snack or a beverage, they were closed, so I'm not going to go in. I'm just going to sit outside here and honk the horn until the kid comes out and gets in the car and goes home with me, instead of coming in and relaxing for a few minutes or something like that. You know, I've seen that lots up there, and I think those are some things that we really need to kind of try to focus on and tell them, you know, they need to be a little bit more customer service oriented. And also, frankly, my experience with their food quality up there is horrible. You know,
Strong letter to follow.
and ask me and I'll tell you what I really think of their food.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, would you like me to address this?
Yeah, go ahead and address that. I was just gonna let them know that Dallas and then Bob are on the.
So there's kind of a couple parts in there. You talk about hours.
Yeah.
You will see that we kind of truncated the hours within the morning to kind of start up a little bit later with the food service, and maybe extended on the evening. You know, as people are coming off the hill and parents are coming to get the kiddos.
Yeah.
What we are kind of being careful to balance is that we do have some people that think that if we stayed open later and served beer and stuff and some drinks and such, that we can make some more money, but we're kind of balancing that with some responsibility as far as we know a lot of those people have to still travel off the mountain. So we're trying to find some balance in there as far as bar hours, if you will.
Well, and a lot of that can just be how you train your servers, too, because I'm an absolute believer in responsible servers.
Absolutely. And they are all tips trained and such,
Yeah.
and we're proud of that fact. The second part, you talk about food quality. The few complaints that I did receive about the food last season seemed like a lot of it was driven towards a lot of things that would come out of the warmers and such. And so this year what you'll see is more made-to-order food. Meaning you order off a short menu or whatever, and then you're just going to have to wait 5 minutes, but I think you'll see that quality.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's yeah.
Dallas and then Bob.
Couple things. How many weddings did you have up there?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Laird, I'm going to say we're in the 20 to. We're still booking them, is why it's hard to track, but we're probably right now around 25-ish.
And what's the average cost?
They vary. You know, what we did see, Councilman, is the margins on the weddings that were set up initially at the end of last year before the lodge even opened up. The margins were very small, to the point where I could probably even say maybe we even lost a couple $100 on some of those weddings. As we learned and crunched those numbers to really address margins, you could see that the profitability went up.
Do we charge by the hour?
We charge by the day.
What do we charge?
And then by the plate. So if they have a food service, which we really encourage, it's by the plate and then by the day. And so for your average wedding, like a 3-day thing, you'll see about $2,000.
So I went over to Tate Pump House the other night for a birthday party, and I think they were telling me that runs you about $200 an hour. So they're getting $1,000 for a birthday party every night. So this issue with the food and what you explained to me, supposedly Spectra is this knowledgeable company. And you'd think they'd be knowledgeable enough to know that if you pre-cook food and put it in warmers and try to peddle it to Wyoming people, it's going to cost the city $400,000 a year. So they're costing us $400,000 a year there, and over $1 million on the other hill, which is the event center. And it just seems to be, it doesn't ever get corrected for some reason. I don't know why that is, Tim. And I'm guessing that you're not a guy that has a huge experience in the restaurant. I do know a couple guys who are, and they always tell, when I took one of them on a tour up there one time, he owns a bunch of restaurants, he couldn't believe what he thought was a bill of goods the city got sold about all that equipment up there, which could be put to use if people know how to put it to use, is what I'm understanding. But you compare that with the guy who took over the golf course, because he did come in kind of like Kavanaugh. He had people putting a shroud of cloud over him, and he came in and he proved himself, And just from what I can tell from my buddies that play golf over there, hey, if you can get a good burger, man, that's a good thing in Casper, Wyoming. And it doesn't come out of a bun warmer. And I am hearing complaints, not from the judge, the ex-judge, the former judge, about.
No
the food
longer
up there.
honorable.
So I hope you can get it straightened out, but I think there's some people in town that probably give you some good advice that know how to run restaurants and food. They can walk through it and tell you what's wrong with the place. Now, why it's losing $400,000, there isn't one person on this council that can tell me why, including me. Why we're losing $1 million, I think it was up to $1.3 million or $4 million, wasn't it, for last year at the event center? Spectra has lost its money. Now, your judge is saying the food, and Spectra has already gone through their $50,000 and through $35,000 of ours, and they still can't figure out how to make money. It should be probably questioned and dealt with. That's my only thought, because I have 83 days left to go there. I don't have enough time to get too in detail, but I hope the management and the vice mayor do it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think your angst with regard to losing money in some of the city's operations is an angst you don't feel alone.
Thank you.
The thing that I would have to say though is we only contracted with Spectra at the Hogadon front for the concession. As Councilman Huber correctly pointed out, the operation relating to rentals and the ski school and the concessions are separate concessionaires as well. The thing that Spectra doesn't operate on our behalf is the rest of the ski operation, running the lift, having employees out there, and so forth. And I would argue the bulk of that loss comes from the operational side of the whole facility, wherein the revenue opportunities are enjoyed by others. And so that loss is, in my opinion, not necessarily one that we can lay at the feet of the restaurant concessioner, although I'm hoping that over time that does improve and the opportunity for revenue enhancement in that function improves as well.
You serve good food though, Carter. It's like some old Western movie I saw that the thieves attacked the wagon train and the Indians attacked, and they were all protecting the cook because he finally learned how to cook. You'd rather save him than anybody. And so when you get good cooks, which is what's turned it around at the 19th hole. People will go somewhere where the food is good. And they'll go there to ski, and they won't sit out in their car waiting for the kid. They'll go in and have a couple drinks and a burger, a piece of pizza, and it changes everything.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, Councilman, my point is very consistent with Councilman Huber's. If we want to make money at Hogadon, we've got to change a lot of things. Getting a good burger up there is a real small piece.
Yeah.
And so turning around a $400,000 loss, I don't think can be realized by selling burgers.
How do we, a larger scope, just for your thought, how do you turn around $1 million, almost $1.8 million in losses?
Can we move
Sorry.
on? Let me just hold on. I got Bob and Jesse still on there, so I'm gonna go to Bob.
Yeah, I think we ought to hang fire a little bit. There's a lot of things we don't make money in the city. We don't make 1 penny off of parks to speak of. We don't make 1 penny off of streets to speak of. However, we do find some of those things that are really necessary to make a community nice and livable. And I look at what we do and what we have in parks and what we have in Hogadon, and I think that's a big piece of what makes it livable. On the other hand, if you want to help turn around the food service at Hogadon, you come up October 25th and enjoy a nice meal. They're having a deal up there, $50 a head, or $50 a couple, I think it is. Well, I'm going up just because I want to go up there on an evening and have a nice time, and I want to support it. So there are some opportunities that we have with Hogadon that we never had with the other building. And we're just now, with 25 or so weddings booked, I'm assuming we can do better than that next fiscal year. And I think it's time to just back off a little bit and say, okay, can we do better? Obviously, we don't like to lose money on anything, but we have to take into account too, that when we say we make money at the golf course, we are not including the capital. The capital has never been included in where the golf course stands. They have, gosh knows how many acres that we could sell overnight for development, for housing, and not lose near as much money. Anywhere, we could make money. But we still find the golf course to be something that people like to do. And if you've ever taken on golfers about changing a hole or moving a building, it's not a good day. They are a very, very astute group at showing up when they need to. So I think it's reasonable to give a guy that we just gave a contract to last November, probably had never run that ski area, it's a new building, it needed a lot of equipment to make the kitchen operable, and granted, it's a darn nice kitchen. But when you build a commercial kitchen today, it's gonna be a darn nice kitchen. And I think it's time we just give a little time to try and make some money at it. And maybe there will be someday somebody walk in and say, look, I'll give you guys $16 million for that place lock, stock, and barrel. At which point, we'd probably have to say, that looks like a pretty good deal.
You and I won't be here, Bob.
That's right.
Or give me $1 a year lease and I'll make profit on my own.
There you go.
That's another thought, because then you're not losing 400,000.
Right.
Jeff.
I've never known the city to make money since I've been here on selling real estate either.
No, you're good. Jesse.
Yeah, just really quick, it's interesting with Councilman Huber bringing up those 3 areas that we could be making money. So I was just curious, with the contracts that we approve, would we be able to see what they are or are not making and having their services up there in our lodge?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So basically, are they making money or not? So you have the ski rentals, you know, how many rentals did you do?
Oh.
What did you charge? What did you make? I'm just curious to know that, and then getting to Councilman Powell's observation of, you know, are we even teed up? And then hearing, you know, no, we need at least a few years of, you know, what our full potential is. So putting all that together and then really understanding how much the lodge is making with all those services combined.
Tim, do you want to address that?
I have seen one of those numbers, and it isn't nearly what you think it is, Jesse.
I can help you with that a little bit, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. That's a great question. You do get to approve all of the contracts that, and so we'll draft those up and we'll put them in front of you. We typically, however, don't put together like P&Ls with those.
Yeah.
However, there's nothing to say that you couldn't say, hey, we want a little bit more information on this. Can you provide the P&Ls or something to that effect? And going back to what Councilman Huber's observations are, those are warranted observations. Those are great points, and I think that I'm going to have one real soon in front of you for the snow sports school that you'll all get a chance to take a look at. And furthermore, I think that what we have for you for a contract and the terms is a very nice deal.
So could I follow up with that?
Yeah, you bet.
So just to be clear, we would have to put in the contract itself, you know, we would like to see the P&L, or?
No, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I get the P&Ls.
Oh, okay.
But when a new contract comes forth after one's expired, we'll draft a contract and get it to you. And I do have all the P&Ls, so I can tell you if you had a question about any of the contracts I put in front of you, you'd have that opportunity to say, hey, what's the P&L here? And conversely, well, why aren't we doing this part of the operation? And then I could probably put together some pro forma to kind of show, well, if we did it, this is how we would do it, and this would be the expense associated with it. And maybe it doesn't look like such a great deal to take it on, or maybe we need to ask for a little bit more on the terms so that our partner, the contractor, we're divvying things up a little bit more fairly,
Okay. Great.
which is always my goal.
Thanks.
Mike.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I think that Councilman Hopkins is exactly correct when he talks about, you know, the amenities that make a community nice and everything. The other thing that I want to say is that in my experience, the city staff up there works very, very hard, and I think that Tim's doing a really good job at working on this. Any of the negatives or anything that I bring up does not reflect on city staff. It reflects on, I'm talking about the structural way that, you know, that everything is structured and put together and the business plan. But I think that that Tim and his people are really working hard and doing everything that they can to make things work good up there.
And I would like to also clarify, just in suggesting privatizing, I'm not in any way criticizing Chris or his staff or his operation. I just think private operations should have more flexibility, that's all. And it would be nice to get out from under that subsidy.
Dallas.
What's the likelihood of losing $500,000 this year, Hold on?
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the tough part with that is we're so reliant on Mother Nature with that. I mean, we could put together a really good business plan, but as we saw last year, we got a month late start. So everyone kind of had the best of intentions, a great plan going forward, and we got a month late start. And so I'm hoping that the weather, the way it stands now, will hold out, and if we can get started at the Thanksgiving break, which is huge for us because the kids are out of school and they want to go up and hit the slopes. I would, to me in my heart, the answer to your question is very slim. But I don't have that crystal
Do we
ball.
use the snowmaking equipment much up there?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, absolutely we do. What I didn't know until I got this job is the man-made snow does tend to last longer than Mother Nature snow. So we make it, we stockpile it so that when we kind of have a dry spell, if you will, we can move that snow around to, make a good experience for our skiers.
And with reference to the homemade snow, actually the snowmaking actual production that they're getting up there is much greater than what the capacity was projected to be. They're working that snowmaking in such a way as to over-optimize or overachieve with it. And so that's really been what's kept things afloat to the degree that it is.
And digging out the pond.
Yeah, well, all of those little kind of things, fixing leaks and that.
Some good equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Tim. Great job. Direction requested a panhandling ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we have a couple of items here on the agenda tonight that deal with ordinance revisions that we will need your help with. Primarily, these revisions are necessary to bring our current ordinances in line with either state direction or case law concern. And so with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Henley, who can even join us at the table here if you'd like, sir, to go through these items with us and talk to us about the issues regarding panhandling and where we need to be with our new ordinance and driver's license concerns and the state statute accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Napier. The first one I think we have before you on the agenda is the panhandling ordinance, and that one is one that was actually brought to our office by Chief McFeeters. He said that there had been several of his officers who were writing panhandling tickets, people who were concerned about panhandling, and I know that probably some of you have seen more panhandlers around town than we used to have. I've seen that. So we looked at that, and indeed it did look like the ordinance we have just was not up to constitutional par. In looking at the case law, what we're looking at here is kind of two things. And really it's a speech question, which is broken down into whether it's a usual protected type of speech, such as you're making a solicitation for a church or you have a political belief or something like that, versus a commercial type of speech. And you now have the Supreme Court, though, saying that we want to take a look at these ordinances and they should be content neutral. So we're going to be looking at all of the ordinances across the way, and if you don't permit one type of speech to be there, then you better not be letting the other types of speeches be present. And so that's kind of where we are with this. So we looked at this, and we were looking at the content. We wanted to make sure that we were actually prohibiting definable conduct. And so in doing that, we said, well, what can we utilize to define conduct that we don't want people to do? And of course, safety, convenience, mobility. You don't want to have people being intimidated, which is kind of a lower form of extortion. You don't want to have threats, harassment, that type of thing. You don't want to have people invading your privacy. If you're having a personal conversation, you're out having a conversation on the street corner and they just won't leave you alone and you're trying to have a conversation. You're in a sidewalk cafe, those type of things. You don't want to be interrupted there and have people loitering around you and asking you for money and kind of just bothering you, picking at you. It's kind of a different thing in this ordinance, though, and maybe some of you noticed that when you went through it. I don't think you'll find many ordinances here, but what we have are some findings, and it's interesting in that more and more, when we start looking at the cases from the Circuit Courts of Appeal in the United States or the United States Supreme Court, even with respect to city ordinances, they'll be looking at kind of that legislative history and to see if you had a good rational basis upon which to make that decision. And so, in the past you would hear always, well, what's the legislative history with respect to the Senate or the House or the national legislature? But now more and more times they'll be looking to see if this will pass constitutional muster, if in fact the city council had a rational basis for what they did, if they were considering both sides of the issue, and then if they did, if they kind of came down and they made a good faith effort, and so therefore they had a rational basis to do what they did. And so in that regard, looking at the ordinance itself as we have proposed it for your review, you'll start off, and we start off with purpose and findings. And so basically we start off and we find and we recognize that there's free speech. We understand that, and we want to make sure that these rights are protected for our citizens, for our visitors, and the like. Then we go through and we talk about the rights that are preserved for other people who aren't solicitors, because they have rights too. So we want to have freedom of mobility. We don't want to have those people being threatened. We don't want to have people acting towards them aggressively. And then we want to make sure that they have security, privacy, things of that nature. And so we go through the findings, which is the first part of your ordinance there, which is 9.10.010. And then we come down to basically definitions, and that's important in this case because what we're precluding is aggressive solicitation to a large degree. And in fact, that's what the ordinance that we're repealing and replacing is called, aggressive solicitation. So in this case, you can't confront somebody, you can't put them in fear of a reasonable person, to have fear of bodily harm. You can't continue to touch people. You can't try to intrude into their personal space by putting something into their car window. You can't force yourself into the company of the other by following them around. And so we go through all of these different things, and again, we're doing this so that we can have a rational basis and explain if this ever were to be reviewed in a court, if in fact then that you were concerned about these things, you had looked at them, this was part of your decision-making and thought process, which is important when you get to whether or not the ordinance is constitutional. So then we start talking about, well, we're going to break this down, at least the way we did this ordinance. So we have areas with heightened personal security concerns, so that's subsection B. And so we're then talking about, well, if you're in a parking garage, because parking garages are kind of stealthed, and so you don't want to be in there, so we don't want people in there soliciting. We don't want people at a public bus stop, because people have to go if they're going to catch the bus. They have to be there, so they're a captive audience, so we give them extra protection for that. And so we have those type of things with respect to this area of heightened personal security concerns. Then we go to subsection C, which is area of heightened personal privacy concerns. And here we're talking about, well, automated tellers. So if we're keying in our PIN code, we don't want somebody to be looking at that. We don't want somebody to maybe be, rifling through our handbag or whatever while we're paying attention to getting money out of the teller machine. We talk about sidewalks, cafes, open window cafes, which we have here, and not to have people standing there making a nuisance of themselves, basically waiting to get paid off as kind of a minor extortion or intimidation type of thing. Then we go to subsection D, areas with heightened public safety concerns. And there we're talking about when you have the people soliciting either high volume or high density traffic or high speed traffic areas. And so we don't want people soliciting on those streets. We don't want them in the street. We don't want them in the medians where they're not going to be safe if they're going to be soliciting. And but on the other hand, we know that there are some people who are going to want to be and will be putting up signs. Believe in this, believe in that. Need help, my family's stranded, that type of thing. They're going to be there, and so we do actually then go through and say, in other areas of the town where it isn't a safety hazard, they have the right to go ahead and have that freedom of speech. And so we have that duality again, which helps uphold the constitutionality of the ordinance. And in that regard, we talk about then with respect to certain things where we have this high hazard traffic areas, we don't have either passive or aggressive type of speech. We just cannot have that just because the areas are too fast, there are too many people there, the traffic medians are too small. And so in that regard, we're saying, no, you can't have either type of speech in those particular areas for safety concerns, basic safety concerns. However, with respect to any type of aggressive solicitation, those are all prohibited under this particular statute. And as you come down, you'll see how that's all defined until we finally get to alternative sites. We make reference that, in fact, this ordinance provides ample alternative sites for passive begging, panhandling, charitable, political solicitations that do not give rise to enhanced public safety concerns or personal privacy and security concerns. So it's a pretty complex type of ordinance. There's a lot in it. A lot is in it for specific reasons. The one area where we did talk about, though, which is kind of specific to Casper, Wyoming, we talk about high traffic or high speed roadways. And so we actually define those, and that is in paragraph F on your bottom, or on page 187 of the packet material. And so what we have there, basically, we've defined those as the following arterial streets, highways within Casper: 1st Street, 2nd Street, 12th Street, 13th Street, 15th Street, Highway 258, Wyoming Boulevard, CY Avenue, Beverly Street, Center Street, Poplar Street, Highway 254, Yellowstone Highway, and Interstate 25. So those are the ones that we've looked at. Certainly, if you have more ideas, more thoughts in that regard, you can certainly let us know, and we can include those. There was one change that I noticed when I was preparing today. At the top of page 188, under ordinance 1.18.040, under subparagraph A, we made reference to charitable begging, political solicitation as defined in section, and then we had 2A, and it's actually 918.02A. And so we list them in that. If you decide to give it a thumbs up, we will make that correction and have that available for your review at the next regular council meeting.
Questions? Jesse?
Just a really quick question. I like the way you constructed it. My only question is, since we do mention OID, do we have to add any definitions or anything like that in form-based code, or that has nothing to do with form-based code for OID?
We made reference to it, so I think that would be a known area which is defined in the city. So I think that would be sufficient enough of a definition. And when you look down there, I was actually looking at the sidewalks down there. Really, the sidewalks aren't terribly bad. There are some areas. You look down there next to Vicki Ujaberry's CPA firm, kind of across from Davis Street. Those are pretty small sidewalks, and certainly given the crowds down there, I can see why someone might be concerned about that. But realistically, I think that the police officers are going to have to use some discretion and thought when they look to enforce this, which they always have to do with any ordinance in any event.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Well, I kind of looked at that and I thought, why is the old Yellowstone district that much different than the, quote, traditional downtown area?
And realistically, I think the traditional downtown area, all of those streets, I think, are pretty wide. There were some down at the old Yellowstone area, and it is defined as a historic area. And you do now have kind of gatherings down there at Davis Street Station, And in that regard, you're gonna have kind of a more concentrated number of people. So you're gonna have that more congestion. So you don't wanna necessarily have people gumming up the entire flow of people with respect to either your citizenry or visitors. Because again, this would be something we don't wanna have happen to where people now don't wanna go to a particular location, particularly one in the city that's a popular one, something where you wanna show off, and people don't wanna go there because, you know, everybody's getting hit up, it's slow, you're getting funneled into this situation. You know, I remember when I went to San Diego, it was a horrible experience. I would never go back downtown to San Diego.
I wonder if that's what you're, if that's the concern that's being addressed, if it would make more sense to say within a 2-block, 3-block radius of
David
Street
Street
Station,
Could
something
be.
like that, because some of those same things seem to me like, you know, okay, if it's on the east side of David Street, it's not, it's okay, on the west side, it's not, you know, that doesn't, it seemed to me like maybe setting up a radius there, if that's what you're concerned about.
And it certainly might be, and that may be a good way to go. And I don't know what the construction's gonna be, you know, the Plains building's gonna probably be another big draw for downtown.
We hope.
That's right.
Maybe we can house all the homeless people in there.
Dallas, and then Charlie.
So, I read this ordinance, thought you did a great job on doing it. I'm totally against it, however, because I think it's a direct attack on the homeless people. We don't have any sidewalk cafes, so nobody's gonna be harassed there. 2 or 3 other things you mentioned, I just don't see it happening. I think this is completely driven to do something with the homeless people in this town. And I run into them all the time, and I don't see any of them yelling at me, creating any problems. I do get asked for money occasionally. I always have to think about why is somebody doing that? And so a good many of those people are mentally ill. And so this big ordinance, I don't think many lawyers could understand that ordinance, let alone homeless people. So it won't act as a deterrent, it's a weapon. And we already have breach of the peace, and we already have no trespassing. And if somebody's yelling and screaming and grabbing you by the coat, he's committed all kinds of other crimes, and this thing isn't necessary. So I think you did your job and it's well written, but I'm totally against it, and I don't think it'll have any impact on what's going on here, except maybe to fill up our jails with poor people and mentally ill people.
And I would just say that, again, if people aren't violating this, they won't be arrested. This is here, if you get a cadre of people to come in, or even just 1 or 2, they can make a whole mess of a city like this. They can make it miserable in the downtown. And so we have this as a prophylactic measure, which will be on our books to be used by the police department if they choose to use it, if they need to use it. Again, these are not, you know, I think there's only been a couple since I've been there, but we were concerned, the chief being on the ball, was concerned that, you know, I want to make sure if we're going to do this, that we have the appropriate ordinance to do it with. And so, you know, I don't see it being used or misused by the police department. I think that probably would be inaccurate if they did. I'd like to think that my staff would not choose to prosecute, and I suspect that the judge would then not choose to find anyone guilty.
And in a perfect world, I would agree with you. But I think it's an unfriendly ordinance. I thought that the criminalizing of our youth under 18 for a little bit of drinking is an unfriendly ordinance. And it's punitive. They're all punitive ordinances against people who can't defend themselves. And quite frankly, I don't like the whole concept of it at all. That's my personal opinion, and I'm good with your one on the driver's license. I think that's a good one, and I intend to support that. I'm not going to support this.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but didn't this come about as a way to legalize panhandling that in our previous ordinance was not legal?
It is more liberal. You're absolutely true.
So it's loosening it's basically removing some of the restrictions that were in place.
That's true, and I think it's all kind of, it also acts as kind of an educational tool for the police department too, because now we have a nice little manual there as to why we're doing this, and you know, they've got a lot of laws to try to enforce.
So, I guess I haven't seen the panhandlers. Where have they been, and would they be are they currently in places that will no longer be allowed because of the listing of the streets?
The ones that I've seen, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, Council, the ones I've seen at least are down by the gazebo, by the Nicolason, and then down in front of the post office, kind of on that street there. That's the one where they usually, there's one individual particularly who's in the streets, and that's kind of a slow-moving street. So the fact of the matter is, as long as he doesn't put his cup through the window or block you from going forward, he's probably going to be able to continue to do that.
Just one more follow-up
You bet.
there. If who knows what's going to happen? I mean, we've all been in those situations where it gets uncomfortable. But what? I guess this isn't part of the ordinance, but can we make assurances that if our police officers do find someone in one of the areas where it's not allowed, that they would kindly say, you can't be here, but you could be over here?
I don't know. Certainly it's a possibility.
Because else, right, nobody's gonna read this, I mean.
And in the real world, what you're saying, this is gonna happen, Jim. Go hang out, please, for a while. Go hang out down there where he's talking about, where there are a bunch of people down there and they sit around. And I don't see them panhandling. I'm sure that they do from time to time, because I do get hit up. And I think that the money will help them. I usually try to give them a little something, so there's a lot of people in town. So I'm not offended by people who
Sean?
How long was the previous panhandling ordinance in effect for?
Let's see if I can determine that.
Guesstimate is fine.
You know, I am thinking that it was in place for probably a decade, 8 to 12 years would be my guess.
Okay.
So-
Well, I can tell you that I've never, since I've been in the jail, seen anybody come to jail on a panhandling charge ever. It's usually disturbing the peace, public intox, loitering, things like that.
You're gonna see it if this gets passed.
I don't think so, because this is a looser version. This is less restrictive. I mean, usually if somebody's causing a scene or being aggressive, they're not gonna come to jail for panhandling. It's gonna be for disturbance or something like that.
You
So,
see the panhandling yourself?
I've never seen panhandling.
Does anybody, Bob lives over there.
Have only one
He gets
small
hit.
one, not downtown.
Sean John found it.
All the time.
Okay.
It looks like this one's been in effect since 1994, so a lot longer.
Yeah, so I mean, again, and I've been at the jail for 11 years and I've never seen it.
Then why do we need a new one?
It's less restrictive.
And you don't see them anyway, so we're gonna even make it less restrictive, so you won't even see them even more anyway, really?
This covers Walmart too,
We're
right?
moving down a path
Well, Walmart's
on
on a-
more defined laws or ordinances for the city of Casper.
That's
that we
usually
don't need,
where
right?
trespassing comes in because they're on private property.
Bob and then Mike.
Yeah, I was just wondering, we have a group that the fire department participates in every year, the boot campaign. And I think it's thrown out.
Those are boot handling, not panhandling.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just wondering, it looks to me like we mentioned street, the very streets that we use for that.
Ooh, can we arrest a fireman for panhandling?
We'd have the PD arresting the fireman.
They come right up to your car. They could be arrested under that ordinance. But they
Like-
won't, and that's why somebody, see, the only people that attack these
I'm
ordinances.
just asking the question, I don't even know if I want an answer.
The panhandlers don't attack these ordinances, John, guess who does it? The ACLU. They take a look at these ordinances and then they put the city into a big lawsuit, and you're trying to fiddle around defending and paying all this money to defend some big lawsuit on an ordinance that doesn't even need to be dealt with.
You'll be up at the council in 83 days.
I know, but
You can
I'm
be
a
the attorney that
taxpayer.
sues.
I'm a taxpayer. I don't wanna have to pay taxes.
If we vote this down, then the original ordinance is still in effect. There's still a panhandling ordinance.
And there won't be a problem.
Mike.
Well, red tape.
Well, I don't think that we think that the cops are all gonna turn into my hero Bernie Fife and go out and start running in everybody that they see on these things. That's just not gonna happen. It's not happening now. It's not gonna happen. But I think that it is important that we have reasonable, well-written, well-drafted regulations like this on the books, so that they're there, you know, that a conscientious, good, well-trained police officer has another thing to use as another arrow in his quiver, so to speak. And I agree with the idea of cleaning up some of these ordinances to make them as likely to pass constitutional muster as they can be, number one. And number two, I've had a lot of people approach me all over downtown over the years, as much as I've walked and everything, and doesn't bother me any, but I can imagine that if I was some little old lady or little old guy or something that was easily intimidated and all that, that you know, and then if they say, you know, and geez, the city's not doing anything to protect us from this and that. So I think this is a good idea. You know, panhandling ordinances came about a long time ago for a good reason, and I think that we need to, you know, I'm gonna support this change. I think it's a good thing.
Can't we go just with
If you
really
need to,
good
I will carry
vagrancy
the bullet
ordinance?
for Barney.
So,
I'll support it just because it's less restrictive. Maybe the next step down is to repeal it.
I think we ought to have John redo the vagrancy ordinance when you hit people on that next.
thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
one more.
Hold that.
He's got number 5 as well.
Oh, 5, operator revision.
I'm for this one.
And
4 or 5.
Maybe you'll vote it down.
this one's much simpler. This is one where basically we have a state statute which says that you're supposed to always have in your possession when you're driving a car your driver's license, and that if you're pulled over, you have to present that driver's license, and so it's basically a carry and display type of statute. But the state legislature, who really controls this purview now since they've entered it, they say that if you in fact don't have it with you, you run out of the house because you're just sort of a loaf of bread, or you go to the gym and you don't want to put your driver's license in your gym trunks because it's going to fall out at the gym or whatever, that if you in fact can show to the court that you had active valid license at the time you received the citation, then you cannot be convicted of that. And so that's the state statute. And in looking at our ordinance though, and this came up because we actually did have someone who was charged with this. They had presented this to the court, and the court and my prosecutor were looking at this local ordinance, and they said, well, it doesn't have that exception, so we can't dismiss. I said, we have to dismiss because under state law, you have to have a uniform laws, they all have to have all laws of a general nature have to have a uniform operation, and once the state has in fact spoken on something, then we can't have just a 29-mile square enclave here where the state law is different because the city's ordinance is different as to who can or can't be convicted. And so for those reasons, we've talked over with our staff, and I think with the judge and everybody is on the same page there. And then we just need to finish up by enacting this ordinance, which would correct and make our ordinance consistent with the state statute.
Yeah. Austin, Jesse.
Isn't our, like if you're out there and you don't have your insurance card, I know our courts in the past, municipal courts, if you don't have it on you and you come back and show you have insurance at that time, they will dismiss that charge. And so then my understanding is if there's a state statute on the same exact subject, that if the two are in conflict, the state statute prevails.
That's correct.
That's generally the law. So you're right in telling your people that, I mean, it's ridiculous if you've got a license, and I've done that a couple times, where same situation, go to the gym, forget your license, and the officer pulls me over, you know, and all that. But it didn't ever seem to be a problem when we produced it. Everything was taken care of. It's like if you have a headlight out, if you go down there and show them the receipt, we fix the headlight, they dismiss that too. So, what bothers me is that people have misinterpreted this law and didn't understand how the two state law interacts with a lesser city ordinance, and certain things get prosecuted that really shouldn't be prosecuted. And that's what bothers me about the ordinance that they voted yes on, because I think it's gonna happen.
Good, John.
Mr. Mayor, Council, actually, this particular case that came to my attention, was a failure to have insurance papers too. And that one had been dismissed, but this one had not, with respect to the drivers. And so, so I said, well, why not? Because I was just familiar with the state statute. I didn't even realize that our ordinance didn't didn't have the same exception that the statute did. And as soon as I learned that, then we started to work towards the resolution that I asked
Thank you
for
for
support
doing
for
that.
today.
Good move on your part.
Jesse and then Mike.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't read the state statute, but I was curious to know if somebody was pulled over, they didn't have a driver's license. What about the passengers? Does state law require that the passengers must also show their driver's license, and should that be addressed in our ordinance too?
It does not. If you're a passenger, you don't have to have a driver's license. Otherwise, you're basically then mandating that everybody carry around a form of ID. It's kind of like an apartheid type of situation. So I would like to think that we wouldn't have that, and we don't have that.
Tell them about your Supreme Court case. That probably will explain some of that. Where the police asked the guy for his license and he was just sitting there doing nothing in his car.
That wasn't a traffic stop, so it was a little different.
But it ended up being a ruling by the Supreme Court. He doesn't have to show his ID, didn't it?
It was a ruling actually by the district court judge, who was the appellate court judge. That's true.
Mike.
Well, I think this is a good thing, and to get the city ordinance in line with the state statute. My only frustration about this, a couple of years ago, guy blew through a stop sign, hit me. The insurance card that I had with me that night was expired, so I got a no insurance citation, which was okay, because I showed him the expired insurance card. It was expired. So I bring my insurance thing back to the court, and the statute says produce it to the court. I went to the court, produced it to them, and they said, oh, you have to go down to the police department and show that to them. I was incredibly frustrated and very unhappy about that, because it says in the statute you go to the court, then the court does that.
You told them that.
But I did. Well, our policy is that you have to do it this way. And that was very frustrating. I see Steve over there like, oh geez. But I think when these things say that they're presented to the court, when you present them to the court, then the court needs to, there's no reason to burden the police department with people having to go up and downstairs and all that. But this is it's a great idea.
It's a good cleanup.
To just clean these things up.
Yeah.
It is a great idea. The other one was a bad idea.
So he's 1 out of 2
Everybody
for
good?
you?
I'm a 50-50 guy.
Now, thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate all your work. Update on agenda review or anything that needs to be talked about. On the grid.
On the grid, absolutely. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I certainly would plug the usefulness of this document with regard to what the outlook is pertaining to items coming up in our recent horizon, our short-term horizon here. One of the things that was brought to my attention by virtue of council discussion recently was pertaining to the holiday prospectus for meetings. We are suggesting for the holidays that some changes be made. One of which would be a work session on the 25th
Christmas
of
Day.
December, which would be Christmas Day. That's right.
I'll be there.
Start without me, will you?
Well, we're proposing that
Because
we
I'm
have
on
no
vacation,
meeting
I
that
might show
night.
up too.
We're also suggesting that for the following meeting, which would be New Year's Eve, that we probably should postpone that meeting versus canceling it, in that that would be a regular meeting wherein we would have bills and claims to approve and those kinds of things. So we will need some kind of direction in that regard pertaining to at least that meeting and probably the cancellation of December 25th.
Do you want direction now, or do you want us to think about that?
Let's
Can we
get it
move
over
the
with.
December 25th meeting to Christmas Eve at 6?
We sure could.
I'm only kidding.
Yeah.
So you need us to postpone?
New Year's Day is a Tuesday.
Yeah, New Year's Day, not New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Christmas is the first.
Might be Wednesday.
I could do it any day that week.
Which week?
The week of the 1st, can anybody, if we did do it,
Do we swear in the new people?
that's the 8th.
How would you swear in?
That's not gonna be our last meeting?
Make those new people show up
Have
on New
83
Year's
days, but
Day.
you're turning it into 84 or 85.
We should rally against
I'm
that.
available that Wednesday.
I think my term, it literally says the 3rd, I think.
What Wednesday are you talking about?
The second.
Because we swear in the new people on the 8th,
Yeah, I think that's right.
the second Tuesday, right?
When does our term actually end, Mr.
Usually,
Mayor?
yeah, the first
Well,
week.
Jesse said his said 3rd.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know, don't quote me on that.
Depends on when you were sworn in, I think, because they're different, and I thought they were all January 1st, but they're not.
They're not?
It's when you were sworn in.
Well,
So is that, so then that 1st would be a regular meeting then?
You're here forever
Yeah.
now.
So we'd have
Yeah.
2 regular meetings in a row?
Can I get the clerk
Unless
to
Amy
clarify
can-
that,
Yeah,
please,
yeah.
if that's all right?
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor? Clerk, you want to stand up and clarify that for us?
I did see more signs though.
So the first would be the first regular meeting. Normally, we could move it to the 8th, and then just, since there are 5 Tuesdays.
And not have.
For January.
Not have anything that week.
Oh.
Right.
Then let's
Just
do
drop
that.
January 1.
But we won't.
And then you'd have one the week of the 29th.
As far as January.
Yeah, you will. I mean, you'll be there to say goodbye.
For 10 minutes.
Yeah, you'll be up there to
Well,
say.
not to vote on anything.
No, but you'll, I mean, I want.
Well, they'll vote on, you'll vote on the couple of things.
I don't think you can do it.
You have to
once
approve the
term
minutes
is up.
and the bills,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
I'd
it's
say
the,
we
it's the
should
previous
have
minutes and the
staff
bills and
look into the
claims.
legality of when we're done and do it before then, or do it.
Then don't show up.
As long as we have a quorum, it's up to
Well,
you.
you can't do it if it's illegal.
It's true.
You just can't dream this stuff up.
Let's just
Tom.
skip January 1.
Everything's illegal.
We're done, we're done. I mean, you know.
Yeah, 1-1, I mean, really.
John, does that make much of a difference if we do one on the 8th for the outgoing members?
No, I would say we just swear in, as usually happens, the clerk will swear in, or the mayor will swear in the new council members beforehand in any event, so your term will be done once they're sworn in.
If somebody refuses to take the oath.
They don't get in.
Do we just keep going, John, until somebody does?
That would be fun.
So, Mr. Mayor, it sounds like the direction is to
Skip the 1st.
skip the 1st and have the first official meeting of the new year be on the 8th. Correct.
Oh,
So we'll make that,
three-week break.
we'll make that happen from a publication and notification standpoint.
And so when are we moving the work session on the 25th to?
We're not.
Cancel.
We're scratching
Yeah,
that too.
yeah, scratching that.
There goes
Get
my
paid
income.
anyway.
My fixed income down to 2.
Your supplemental incomes.
Mr. Mayor, one more thing, one,
Mr. Manager,
Into the
do we get
bankruptcy
paid anyway?
court. Yeah.
you paid anyway, that's right, yeah. One of the things
only
that we typically do is give employees the opportunity to take either the day before Christmas off or the day before New Year's off, and so we try to have our work areas rotate so that we have coverage on those days, and I'd like to continue that. And so we haven't had that issue for the last couple of years because we've had the holidays fall on the weekends. So if it's okay with the council, we'll move in that direction like we have in years past.
Except for those 2 guys. They gotta work it out.
They're gonna work it out.
Can't do both days? They should have both days off.
Like that.
Do it. Good.
Thank you, and that's all I have for the agenda.
Thank you. Charlie, do you have anything for the legislative?
Well, I was going to go over the WAM board meeting,
and some of the things that were discussed, but my computer just died.
Thank
So
God.
you're
We got a pass.
Good move.
There was a Region 4 meeting a couple weeks back, and we met with Senator Case and Senator Bebout, yes, and Representative, I can't remember. Anyway, and we had very good discussion of the upcoming legislature. There is widespread recognition within the legislature of the problems that the cities face regarding ongoing funding and support for basic services and the direct distribution. We've done a good job of making sure that information has been presented and is understood. And the worry, of course, is that in the next legislative session, there will be some move to reduce the direct distribution and replace it with some taxing authority or some additional sales tax revenues, which would work fine for us because we have a robust retail economy and we have good tax revenue, but it would do absolutely nothing for the smaller municipalities that rely entirely on the direct distribution for their very survival. So there's going to be this is going to be an interesting session as the legislators wrestle with all of these things. These three legislators were frustrated with the unwillingness of the schools to accept funding reductions based on the court cases, and so WHAM is trying to avoid a situation where we are seen as buying with the school systems for the same funds. We're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So, but the idea that local municipalities should have more taxing authority is clearly gaining some momentum. And there's certainly reasons for the legislature to do that because it reduces some of the pressure on them and puts it on us to do that. So anyway, I will have a more detailed report
Thank
at our
you.
work session in 2 weeks.
January 8th.
And I'll make sure my computer is charged up before that.
If I might, I've talked to a couple of legislators and I've been in every ear I can find that has a yellow and black brown tag on its shoulder. One of the things that we had discussed over some coffee a while back was the idea of we got first-class cities, second-class cities, whatever it is. We're first-class city, right?
4,000 or above.
Yeah, so you do something different for those cities,
Right.
which would be taxing authority, and then below that, you'd use the direct distribution more as a fill-in.
And I think they're already
And
heading in that
Yeah,
direction.
and
Bob.
I got some good response to
Yeah.
that idea, so.
Yeah. It's gonna take some creative work to get this done, so.
Because little cities simply couldn't generate it if they had another 3% tax, they still couldn't keep up the streets.
Some of them have a convenience store, and that's it. Some of them don't even have that, so. I'll have more next time.
Mike, you have anything?
No.
Bob?
Yes, you did, you said you were
Well,
gonna do this.
oh, okay, I thought you were gonna do that. Councilman Hopkins and I this morning went to the grand opening over at
Hey, give me credit here.
and Councilman Vice Mayor Powell was there too, that's there. But, over at the rescue mission, and that's really a nice facility and very nice what they've done there, and everybody that I talked to there expressed great appreciation for the support that the city's given there over the years, you know, I'm a believer in spirits, and I got a good feeling there. There are good spirits there, good work's going to be done there, and I think that's a good program and a nice thing, something the city can be proud of.
Thanks, Mike. Bob?
Nothing, thank you.
Sean?
So I have more of a question for information purposes. So I've been getting a lot of input from various employees about losing sick time and vacation time and things like that. So I kind of want to get a feel for what's exactly going on there.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we are entertaining a conversation with an employee committee with regard to the possibility of transitioning to a paid time off system versus a vacation sick time system that we're currently in. At this point in time, we are discussing an idea and inviting this employee task force, if you will, to bring concerns forward with regard to the idea as it stands currently. The hope is that as we go through the discussion phase, that we will develop a proposal that is effectively vetted, and then we would bring it forward to the council to confirm or to help support. And so what you're getting probably is feedback that focuses on one piece of an idea that at this point is not a feature of a proposal that we would bring forward to you. And so what I would ask is that council redirect those questions to the process so that indeed we can vet a proposal and then bring forward something to you that has had the advantage of having thorough discussion and conversation. And so we're pretty early right now in that process to be able to say definitively what we would like you to support.
Good.
Yeah, so is the purpose behind this a cost savings benefit?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, I can tell you that my bringing forward a more expensive or richer benefit would not be advantageous to the organization because we are not getting revenue that's supporting our current benefit right now. We're just not. And so to save money, that'd be a great outcome. But I don't envision that will be the case. On the other hand, it would not be responsible on my part to bring you a proposal that would cost more. And it wouldn't be beneficial on your part either because we don't have the revenue to support it.
And just one more follow-up. Do you have a time frame when we would see the proposal?
My hope is, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, that you would see a proposal by the end of the calendar year. And so that's what I'm shooting for.
And then I had one more.
Good, you bet, Sean.
Do we know where we're at on the step increase thing, or what's going on with that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the hope would be that this same committee, this task force of employees, if you will, would also have the opportunity to vet a pay-for-performance program as well. The council will recall that you did set aside funding that would help implement a program of that nature. I suspect that what you're going to see is that we're going to see more of a linear approach to where we vet a paid time off program and then we vet a pay-for-performance program. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to be able to do it in tandem where you would see two proposals by the end of the calendar year. But I'm hopeful that by the end of the fiscal year, we will also have had the opportunity to bring forward a pay-for-performance program as well.
Okay. So by the end of the fiscal year, we'll see both proposals.
Correct. Although I'm hopeful that the paid time off program would be before the end of the calendar year. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Jesse, you have anything?
I have a bunch of stuff actually. I've been gone for a while. I finally caught up on emails and comments, concerns, and complaints, and some of that ties into, I guess, water replacements that was typically put out for bid and was done by the private sector, and I guess we took that on this year, which is different from previous years. And I'm fine with the city doing any replacement or paving project, like a paving project on Walsh Drive, for example. but I think it would be important for the community to know how much money we actually are saving, or if we are saving any money at all. So I'd like that to be put out there, whether it's a resolution saying, hey, we paved this street, here's what it cost us, and perhaps this is why we didn't put it out in a competitive bid environment to do that by that area. I'm not sure if that would have to be, pushed forward by council. I know earlier we passed, all concrete jobs, for instance, had to be or are going to be done by the private sector. So I was just curious to know why the water replacements is being done by us and what the cost savings are, and if we could put forward future projects like that out in the public so the public understands this is why we're taking it on ourselves.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's a great question, and it's an appropriate discussion to have, particularly when it comes to the general fund, which, as you know, is a very vulnerable fund to cost increase and so forth. Council will recall that with regard to street projects in particular, the recommendation that we brought forward as a part of reconciling the budget deficit that we were experiencing to the issue of making more concessions in the services that we provide through the general fund. Streets, in particular, was one that we made significant changes with. For example, we endeavored at the time, with council's direction, to move reconstruction projects with regard to streets out of the general fund altogether and ensure that those projects were done in the public sector. And so that change has occurred. A lot of those practices are now different, and reconstruction projects are bid entirely. When it comes to water lines and sewer lines and that kind of thing, we have not gotten that direction from the council, and that's probably because we haven't brought forward a proposal in that regard to direct staff as definitively as we have with regard to street projects. And that's because for street projects, we do spend a lot of money out of the general fund on materials and equipment and so on. And so we did gain some savings in the general fund. The thing that I would have the council recognize and remember, that if we should move forward on the utility side in the direction that we did on the street side, we will likely see project costs increase, in that when it comes to funding those types of projects through the public sector, we do incur the cost of their overhead and everything else that they build into the overall bid. That's not to say that that's a reason to not do it, but it is a fact of what we face with that question. And so, in fairness, we haven't asked council for that direction. We can certainly prepare a discussion in that regard on the utility side. We have asked for direction on the street side, and council was clear about what we should do in the streets portion of our operation.
Okay, so we haven't paved any streets then this year or since that was put in place?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we have not reconstructed streets
Okay.
since that direction has taken place.
Right.
We still do patches and those kinds of things internally,
Mm-hmm.
but reconstruction, we bid completely
Okay.
on the street side.
Great.
So Jesse, do you still want, would you like, is that something you want more investigation
Well,
into?
there were some contractors that I guess were used to the yearly water replacements being bid out, and then this year is different than previous, so I was just curious to know why is all.
Okay.
So I mean, is it just because new management, I guess, is that your answer? So I don't know if I picked up the reason why we changed from previous years, apart from us not giving specific direction to a specific proposal.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, without Mr. Beamer here, I'd probably be ill-advised to give you an answer off the cuff, but I can tell you that I have not given direction that would say from now on, we are not bidding the miscellaneous water and sewer repairs and replacements.
Okay.
That direction has not come from myself. But in the same token, I haven't told utilities that, you know,
Right.
that they should do it all on their own either. So,
Okay.
repairs and so forth, I would suggest is pretty typical of what we do. But I would agree with you that full-on reconstruction or network expansions or whatever, we have historically bid out.
Okay. I guess if I could just get information from the utility department about that, and then I'll just let them know as to why and go from there. Sure, if I need to bring it up again or not. Next is, let's see, the Plains RFP. So somebody brought up the parking lot that we left out of the RFP. You know, if somebody went in there and then spent the 700 some odd thousand, or how much it is going off the appraisal amounts, and wanted the parking lot, you know, they're spending $1 million on property, but then we're not giving them their own parking lot. I guess they could scrape it all and then put in their own surface parking. But that was a concern, so I just wanted to raise that to the rest of council, that it might be a deciding factor not to even try to bid on it if they're worried about.
And you're talking
parking down
Plains
there.
property?
Yeah. So the corner of David and Midwest.
We kept that off the
Right.
So I guess just for discussion around the table, that is a concern for some people that are having those discussions.
Wanting that section
with
too.
entrepreneurs, hey,
Yeah.
this doesn't make sense, why we don't have parking, but we're gonna spend over $1 million on a piece of property and not have any parking
Yeah,
dedicated to our business. So I don't know if that would wanna be an addendum. It sounds like there may be even an addendum to the RFP as it stands now. So if we threw that in there, how do you guys feel about it, or do you think it's needed or warranted?
What about?
That's kind of where I was headed too, Jesse. I've had some people bring up the idea, if they bought the 3 buildings that are together, building 1, 2, and 3, and wanted to do a consolidated rebuild of all 3 of those, doing something, maybe something different in each one. I guess maybe I'd like to have a little feedback from our group or from our staff saying, you know, if somebody wants to do that, maybe make an addendum that if you want to do all 3 of those buildings, that piece of parking lot should go with those 3 buildings. But I guess I'd like to hear from staff before we put out an addendum. We've certainly got the right to put an addendum on the RFP, but there is some merit to that, I think, and I guess I'd like to hear feedback from staff on that.
Is that something council's okay with? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I can talk to that issue right now if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah. The discussion that we had with regard to putting that RFP together was, what is it that we want to leave on the table with regard to public parking in general? And the direction I thought we got was the parking that is out there now, which would include the southern parking lot, if you will, on the Plains block proper, as well as the parking that is north of the K-Larks building to be made available for the public. Now, my assumption was that while that would remain as public parking, I didn't think that the direction was that it would be exclusive of new tenants being able to use that for their customers as well. And so I always assumed that that lot and space that is available in that block in its entirety could be used by tenants as well as their customers moving forward. But I didn't think you wanted it to be exclusive to whoever occupies those buildings, if there should be any at all. And so I think we have to be real careful about the distinction that we communicate moving forward, because if indeed we say, yep, that's going to be available for the retailers or the tenants or whatever, that would kind of imply that it wouldn't be available for the public. And that would be contrary to what I thought you directed us to do.
Charlie?
And you're absolutely right. But I remember that conversation, Carter, about view this as public parking. I guess for me, you know, what happens with this whole process is, it's hard to overestimate its importance to the community. And all along, I've wanted us to create a process where people could be as creative and as imaginative as they possibly could with what might happen there. And so if someone came up with a proposal and they needed that space for parking or whatever, in order for their proposal to actually take off, I think that was what you were saying, Jesse, is that a possibility? And we prevented that from happening by saying, no, we're gonna hold on to this. I think that would be a loss, if I said that in a way that makes
Well,
sense.
maybe that's a good approach. Say this, we would accept it as an option.
Yes, that's what I think we should do, is say, if you want to create a proposal for this, you of course would have to pay for it, whatever its value would be. And that we would also consider a proposal that would include that lot.
Maybe that's the way to do it. Would that work?
And then anybody that really wants that can make that proposal. And I don't think I guess I would have to ask John if we're in any way disadvantaging people who are staying close to the language of the existing RFP if we made that exception for someone.
But we still have to put out a notification because we're changing the rules. But if we made it an option to do that, I mean, a lot of contractors will say, look, here's what I bid, but here's an option you might like better.
Yeah,
And that's common. So maybe that would be one way to handle it.
Yeah, and I think you could do that as long as everyone had the opportunity to come in and say, this is my idea, I want this included with my proposal for your consideration. But we also need to have that appraised and that appraisal amount published.
And follow up, and we may look at it and say, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I think Casper will be better off if this stays public parking. We still have that option.
Yeah. But if somebody comes up with one that's just a gosh awful winner, we'd have to say, well, yeah, we'll make the deal in parking lot.
So then if we go that direction, then John, you're saying we'll need to get an appraisal of that and put that in the agenda?
I think we would.
Okay. So is council okay with giving direction to city to do that? Kenny?
You know, the firehouse has parking, Gaslight has parking, so in the immediate vicinity, businesses already do have their own parking designated on or near that block. The next thing I want to look at is expunsion of juvenile records. Is that something that we have to bring up as a policy? And it doesn't even have to be a policy, but just to make that an easier process for minors when we were talking about minors in possession of alcohol, and how the one kid that I guess wanted to be a doctor or whatever, it came up at some point in his professional life that he had a misdemeanor for having that. So, you know, whatever we could do to help, you know, people be put on the right path for success, hopefully.
I tried that once, remember? I think I voted down.
I did, but then I saw more information. You know, there was that email that I think I forwarded along about what somebody was doing in New Mexico and helping with criminal justice reform and things like that. And then I just read more about the article, and when you click on the link and look at it, it does more than just juveniles. It even helps with, you know, minor offenses for adults too that have somewhat of a criminal history, but they're trying to turn their life around, and this record is hurting them. So it's just interesting to me. So I was just curious how we would go about changing that. You know, do we go to our judge? Is that a city thing? I don't know how it works.
John wrote a memo on it.
You know, I did look at this, and in fact, we have a process already in place, which is very easily. As a matter of fact, the lady that you were talking about had come in, and to my knowledge, was able to go get a form from our municipal court to get that resolved.
Okay.
Very simply, without even retaining an attorney. I mean, I did visit with her for a bit of time. But to my knowledge, it's a very easy process. Now, it may not be as broad as you're thinking. This was kind of for some specific type of matters.
Okay.
But as far as a municipal court process, it's
so
slick.
you know, any kid that isn't familiar with the process, maybe doesn't even tell his parents or whatever, are they aware of that process when they do go to court, or even when they step out of court?
You know, I don't think that there are any advisements specifically saying, oh, by the way, keep in mind, you know, when you turn 18 or 21 or whatever, that you might want to consider this. There are no advisements that I'm aware of.
Because we do hand them that form, right? Of, you know, I can't remember what the form is. I sat on, or just went to a session just to see how the process works, and I saw them all get a form that the bailiff handed them.
Sure, they all get their form advising them of their basic constitutional rights, jury, right to subpoena witnesses, jury if in fact it's a jailable offense, that type of thing. But to my knowledge, it does not include anything that you know, once you reach 18 or 21 years of age, that you can come back in and have alternative remedies, or at least make application for some alternative remedy or expense.
Would it be a bad idea to put that on that form, or we can't give them advice kind of thing? How does that work?
I think you can advise people of what's out there, you know, whether they take advantage of it or not.
Okay.
You could include that, I suspect.
If I might weigh in on that, I don't think that it's generally a good idea to put that kind of a thing on there, because it would, in my opinion, tend to confuse people, tend to, you know, they would read it in a manner that, oh, well, this is, if I plead guilty to this, I'm automatically going to get this expunged at some point, and things like that. So as a general proposition, those kind of expungement things are not included in that basic package of advisements, and I would recommend against doing that, because I think it would, if anything, just confuse people more.
Right.
And you know, maybe create some false expectations on their behalf, on their part.
So how can we educate the general populace that isn't familiar with court, municipal court? I know it's obviously, it's a law. Don't
Probably,
break it.
you know, the social media, the internet's a bad thing in a lot of ways, but it's a good thing in a lot of other ways. You
Yeah.
know, put something on there. You know, there are provisions that you can sometimes get things expunged.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, I like it.
that might be a good idea for that.
I'm gonna guess, Jesse, I'm the only one in the room that's ever had a record expunged for a client. And it isn't easy to do.
No.
And I didn't charge either person because they couldn't afford it. So, I don't know the methods John is talking about where they got a form from the municipal court. But was that an actual expungement, John?
I think it was expungement, yes.
How
I'll
was,
have to take a look, but yeah, it sounded like just exactly what this individual was looking for.
has to be signed by a judge though.
Yes, it has to be reviewed by the judge.
And I'm working on an expungement for 2 people right now. It's really difficult.
Okay.
And that's why I really didn't want this particular ordinance to be passed against the minors, because it's too difficult. They can't afford it, and I don't know what John's talking about. I'd like to have him, like, he can explain that to me later.
Only 2 things left, sorry.
You're good, Jesse.
Riverton recently passed an ordinance for those that are arrested for public intox multiple times, that they put a picture to all the people selling alcohol in their town. That idea? Do you hate it?
Bad idea.
I thought it was a great idea.
Shaming.
So, did you guys
Shaming.
see that? What
Public
Riverton-
shaming?
I didn't see it.
So you have a picture of a person that has been arrested for public intox. I think our record here in Casper is what, up to 43 or something like that. Anyways, if you sell to this person, they're actually fined $750. The person selling it.
In Riverton, that's what they do in Riverton.
They just did it.
Oh, wow.
And there is, I
Sounds
think
like a
it's
great
still
idea.
on the law that's still on the state books, that I think it's the same statute that talks about selling to minors. It's selling to inebriates or something. You know, there is a state statute about that. And while I absolutely agree with you about the idea that public shaming and that kind of thing is not a good thing, I don't know how you could, you know, sit there and say, okay, if you sell to this guy here, we're going to arrest you for selling to an inebriate.
Mhm.
You have to use our high school yearbook picture.
Yeah, something, you know, but because public shaming is just a horrible idea, and
We
you know,
do it though.
Well, we're not
Well,
putting
we
it
do,
on Facebook or social
but,
media. It's just on. It could be. Not
Then
even
you're
seen
barring private business to sell to whoever. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, if you're over 21 and you want to drink your life away and kill your liver, then that's on you.
But it's at our expense.
That was
The
at our
taxpayers,
expense.
because we're the ones paying for them to be in your jail, paying your salaries to watch over this guy.
That's why I have the public intoxication programs.
Right.
Now we're gonna pay for all the panhandlers to be in our jail, cause they don't have money to pay a fine.
Just wanted to bring it up. Ribbons in it. Just wondering what you guys thought. So thank you. Next, the International Property Maintenance Code was specific for the landlord, tenants and slumlords is the proper name. So what about putting the state statute for Title I, Chapter 12, or Chapter 21, Article 12, into our ordinance to deal with that they have to keep up with plumbing, electrical, they must be sanitary
The
conditions.
Landlord Tenant Act?
It's residential rental properties, I think is the chapter title. But that would address it without putting in the International Property Maintenance Code, if that's the reason that we're doing it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we are working on a draft proposal that would help us to do what you're talking about. And part of that solution may actually include that reference.
Okay.
And so we've got something coming together that we'd like to present to you here when we're complete, if you will. And it would strike at the heart of the issues pertaining to just exactly what you're describing. And so hopefully with that solution, council will feel much better about the approach and give us a thumbs up to move forward.
Okay, great. And then
How many amendments do you have?
last one, and it's back to the golf
You've
course.
got like
So
a half an hour.
we have a public
This is
course,
2 weeks.
and you're not allowed to bring your own golf cart, and you're not even allowed to have your golf cart during the hours that we have on our own website that it's supposed to be open. So I was just curious to know why we don't allow golf carts on our public course, and if there's, just what the reason is, and then I guess I'll decide if we should change that or not.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman.
Not your own.
Well, yeah, cause we get rental from the cars that we own.
Well, what private ones do, they'll charge you $400 a season, for instance, and then you can have your own golf cart all you want.
Very few places in Phoenix, for instance, allow people to have their own cars.
Paradise Valley does, and so does Casper Country
They
Club,
do.
so the privately owned
Because
places that
people
do
live on
allow
the
it.
golf course.
Well, they live on it, but they also pay the $400 or $600 that it is for that season to
I don't
have
think
their own,
anybody
because
lives on
the
it.
golf course is losing money to do that, but you pay them that money, and that helps you make up for that cost.
I think he's got an answer, Jesse, hopefully.
Well, I tell you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we have an opportunity to evaluate the product that we're putting out at the golf course, in that the contract, if you will, that we have with our current purveyor of golf services is coming due in March, is that right? April 1. And so, to me, the questions that you're asking are extremely timely, in that if council wants to change the product with regard to what we offer, and I would suggest and ask that we do so with an eye towards trying to also improve the revenue possibilities as well. If we can find that sweet spot of balance, so to speak, then I would encourage you to be thinking about those things, because this discussion is coming up soon, and we're going to need your input and discussion and ultimately decision with regard to the direction we want to go with that golf course, in concert with the either renewal of the current provider or with a new one.
Okay.
And so I like those questions, and I think we need to be thinking about that and discussing it, because if we want to make changes, now's the time to make that happen.
May I address his part about the golf cart?
Yeah, and then Charlie.
There's a club down in Phoenix that allowed that, and they didn't think it through, and here's what happened. Here comes a guy with a golf cart that looks like a Hummer, that has wheels this big, and he qualified. And then here comes a guy with a red golf cart that looked like a '57 Chevy, and you had all these different looks, and people hated it. And so they changed the rule, but for some reason they grandfathered all these goofy golf carts in, and they're slowly getting rid of those people. But what you want, if you're gonna do that, then we would have to, I think all the golf carts have to be the same color, because it's distracting for golfers who walk, and you got a Hummer driving by over another deal and all this. And so there's a lot to that. And since there are no houses around that course, people who bring the golf carts in will be bringing them in trailers and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I've seen that over at Three Crowns. But generally speaking, it isn't something, unless you're in a golf course community where you just pull out of your house and you drive over in your golf cart, that it really works well.
What a great opportunity for us to charge those people a storage fee throughout the year.
And pay insurance in case their golf cart gets,
Sure, pay
whatever.
Charlie?
But if you have a guy that wants to do it, bring him over.
To quote a former mayor, my snarky comment, I think we should triple the cost of golf carts, because golf barely qualifies as a sport as it is. It's ridiculous that people drive around
You just
to
tilted the
play
camera
golf.
there.
Unless they're handicapped, then I could see a golf cart. But make them walk.
It's tough to walk links, I can't.
You sound like you have
We're gonna
Irish.
put your 18-pack of beers. You're a Scotsman.
That's all I have, thank you.
Thanks, Jesse.
Question.
No, let's start using the, what do you call that, backpack?
Can you give anything?
I have a couple things for you, but I'll maybe just catch you after the meeting unless you're on a time crunch, and I can catch up with you later this week.
No problem.
No problem. Cutting employee benefits though, because I know we did that last year for some of their, I don't remember what form of time off, but I mean, I took a lot of heat all year long, and I really don't want us to touch employee benefits this year. I think it's been a really hard year for the entire community, and we've cut staff, we've crunched, and I know your mission is to bring a budget that works, and I applaud you for that, but man, I don't wanna do it on the backs of the employees. So, I just throw that out there, that I want to go quietly into the good night. So don't make me make a stand and torment you for my last 2 months. And I just had kind of a catsy question for you later, nothing.
No problem.
Well, it's an interesting question, but I don't wanna torture everybody, so.
No problem. Let's do it.
Yes.
Well, I think I'm right on this. Our health benefit pool of money is broke. It's broke. By that I mean it has no money in it. So we're gonna have to put at least $1.5 million in that, which I think should probably be $2 million. And I don't know if you plan on doing it that this year. I'd like to get that one corrected before I leave office. The other one I'd like to see is that we give a $1,000 bonus again, the Charlie Powell bonus in December to our employees, which will correct some of these problems. I know that's 700 and some thousand. I didn't intend to say that, but that's what I'd like to see happen. But interestingly enough, October is National Bullying Prevention Month. And I'm only gonna take 4 or 5 minutes on this. So I did some research. There's 2 different areas of bullying. One is the face-to-face sort of thing, and then what they call cyberbullying, which is over a computer or a cell phone. And in Wisconsin, they passed a misdemeanor that it's a misdemeanor to send an email or other computerized communication with intent to frighten, intimidate, threaten, abuse, or harass another person. Now, what the problem here is, and I didn't realize this, I've talked to a couple school teachers, and what they're telling me is there's a lot of bullying going on, but the teachers won't report it. They don't want to get into it. So some states have passed bullying statutes that require these things to be documented and reported, just like if you take a child into the hospital and has 2 black eyes, the police have to report that to the welfare department. It's the only way it's going to protect the child. But I looked up some language for a resolution. I think it's important for us to do this, to make our statement about bullying. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences of this. Whereas bullying and harassment are widespread widespread problems with significant adverse consequences affecting youth across the country. And whereas bullying includes a wide variety of behaviors, but all involve a person or a group repeatedly trying to harm someone who is perceived to be weaker or more vulnerable. And whereas bullying and harassing can involve direct attacks with hitting, threatening, intimidating, maliciously teasing, taunting, name-calling, making sexual remarks, stealing or damaging belongings, bullying and harassment can be subtle, indirect attacks, spreading rumors, and encouraging others to reject or exclude. And whereas bullying and harassment have led young school children to commit suicide, bullying and harassment can lead teens that are the target of bullying and harassment to feel tense, anxious, and afraid. It can affect their concentration in school and lead them to avoid school in some cases. Whereas almost 30% of youth in the United States, or over 5.7 million children, are estimated to be involved in bullying, either as a bully, a target of bullying, or both. In a recent national survey of students in grades 6 to 10, 13% reported bullying others, 11% reported being targets of bullies, and another 6% said they bullied others and were bullied themselves. Whereas the American public, in this case Casper, Wyoming, is concerned about the safety for all children. The problems of bullying and harassment are among the most prevalent and profound that most schools even face. They continue to seriously disrupt our school environment and affect the lives of millions of students every year with major adverse academic and safety consequences. It goes on, and what it was a resolution prepared by the NAACP, which they're sending to all the schools asking them to accept. And then there are two videos out that I guess are fantastic. One of them is called Bullying, Stop It, and that's what they're trying to show in the schools. And another one is Cyber Bully Virus, and how terrible this is and how it's seriously affecting the youth of this country. And they're asking that, there's one article here about anti-bullying bill buttresses West Palm community programs. And they're saying that they want cities to do this. They want cities to pass resolutions or ordinances, but they want them prepared in such a way that it doesn't haunt a child as they grow up. Like what very likely will happen with the ordinance you guys voted for on the drinking. These things haunt these children and create problems into their later years. We've seen a huge display of that with our new Supreme Court judge. Things that he may or may not have done when he was 15 or 17 years old. That he's not the same person he was 40 years ago. If there's anybody in here, I don't even think that it's the same person today that they were a year ago. But I'm going to prepare a very simple bullying resolution, and I hope it's unanimously passed. What?
Is that bullying? The bully lamp is out, man.
Anti-bullying.
You better pass it.
Just bring it. It's just and this is October. It's Bully Awareness Month, which I was surprised when I looked at that because it's an easy thing to see it. But I think it's a responsible thing for us to do. So, other than that, I suggest we leave the golf course alone and they'll take care of themselves.
Jesse, has NLC done anything with bullying?
It's a good question, I could look it up.
So a lot of times they'll come up with a, draft ordinance or some ordinance language that they've.
Right.
hammered
Something
out.
that Wham doesn't have.
No. It's all over several.
Only since that
Most
was
of the
last.
states have passed some sort of bullying
Just saying.
statute or ordinance.
Wham does other things. Well, I guess I'll mention this whole thing with the DDA and the snow removal equipment so people know. We partially funded that, and I guess the question was who was gonna own it? Did we ever resolve that, Carter? Because their point was if it was gonna be owned by the city, why would it be the DDA's responsibility to make up the difference? It's a reasonable question.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I have to confess that I can't remember what was included on the application with regard to that particular request of the council. Certainly, the initial pitch to me was that this was a piece of equipment that the DDA would own, that they would use on behalf of the city to help supplement the services that are conducted downtown for snow removal and snow fighting and that kind of thing.
Right, so what, give me money so I can buy you a snow plow or a snow blower. That just doesn't make sense to me. I don't see why the city would own it.
And that's what,
Well, if I may, we do own a piece of equipment in the parking garage, though, that the DDA operates, right?
I can't remember exactly how that relationship is, but the whole concept that is antithetical to me is owning a piece of equipment that other employees would drive and operate, that's right. So I can't support having the city insure a piece of equipment where other employees operate.
Non-employees operate.
Non-employees operate, that's exactly right. And so the impasse that I have in my mind with that concept is that very issue right there. And so I thought the proposal was that the city would provide funding for them to own and operate on our behalf to, again, expand the services that we don't currently provide for that particular geographic area. And so beyond that, I'm not sure we can do it.
All right.
Yeah.
I still think, you can look at it that way. You can also look at it as we have some people that are stepping up to volunteer to do this, which is a job really that is the city's responsibility to make the sidewalks good.
Right.
I don't think we ever accepted operations of Davis Street Station. We own the property, but I don't think we've ever accepted operations.
It's our sidewalks.
And Mr. Mayor,
It's their sidewalks. It's the downtown sidewalks.
It's their sidewalk.
It's their sidewalk,
Just
yeah,
like it is
It'd
in
be
front
like
of a
in front
business.
of my house.
Well, you're right.
In front of my house, I have to clear my
You're right.
Do mine.
That's
I
exactly.
stand corrected on that.
They have to plow their, in front of
I
their
stand corrected.
stores and,
Yeah, that's right.
It's like every other sidewalk.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. No, nothing else.
I don't have anything, so.
All right.
All right, almost an hour early.
Thank you, everybody.
How about that?
Have a very good night.
Yes.